Welcome to In the Barracks, a place for prior and active duty service members, first responders, and their friends and family to hang out and talk about life. The Barracks is a place to share thoughts, ideas, accomplishments, and dreams with the goal of encouraging people to stay connected to the world and do the same for others.
Welcome to In the Barracks. We're here today, beautiful Saturday morning during COVID-19 shelter in place. But we got myself, Steve Gatlin, Mr. Michael Pritchard up there, Dr. Tim Wally from Napa, California. And we're super excited to have actor, comedian, director, artist extraordinaire from San Francisco, Mr. Mike Meehan. Welcome.
Thank you. Also a carpenter. That's probably what I do a lot. That's not
carpenter.
Too much smoke.
We can put your. Yeah, well, we'll be happy to put your number across the bottom of the screen if you want to grab some gigs during the shelter in place here. I mean, people are. I got some stuff I need done.
Yeah, I got this deck out back that seems to be going down.
He's gonna have enough work right now.
Yeah,
that's right.
There
you go.
I'll be back.
You know, Mr. Pritchard up there, knowing you for so long and knowing your background, of course, you're a Marine like myself, Semper Fi, and he said we need to call this guy up. So here you are. This is why you're here.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Although I'm probably not as illustrious as you guys. As I told you before, Steve, I went unauthorized absence on the day I was going to be promoted to corporal. So.
There's no shame in that, Mike.
Well,
we were going to promote you to corporal, but you ain't here.
Well, I think the part of then, in all fairness and full disclosure, I think the part that I left out about me was I was actually a military police officer. So if you want to go ahead and come on over, we can go ahead and take care of that. And I worked in the brig at Camp Pendleton for 6 years, so we had plenty of unauthorized absentees popping through for 30 days at a stretch. But I don't think they're too worried about you anymore right now, Mike. You're good. You're safe.
No, and I was a lightweight. I was in the reserve, so I was defending my country one weekend a month.
Well, either way, man, you got the title Marine, so.
Yep.
Steve, can you at all talk about your cell extractions, or should we just leave that untalked about?
My cell extractions? Sure. I mean, we'll leave the names out, but there's actually fair, firm, and professional. Fair, firm, and professional. That's what it said on our badge and everything. Okay, Mike?
Hey, Mike. You believe that, don't you?
Absolutely. Steve is the kindest, gentlest soul I know. He saved the patrol in Korea.
Well, the reason I love Michael is that he has done so much for veterans. He has done so much for guys on the street, helping people on the streets and doing shows and doing comedy shows. Tons of benefits with me and my brothers, and a remarkable spirit, a gifted soul, a great San Franciscan. And just to know that he's on the streets and he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing with his time and talent, not just as a dad, and he has 2 kids, but he's the uncle to so many, and a good leader in our community. And the stuff that he gets involved with and the benefits that he and I have done together are just remarkable, to uplift the human spirit and to help folks on the streets. And he's always out there for his fellow vets. He's always out there helping the homeless. And he's also a guy who helps people in coaching, in sobriety and respect and decency in the community. So all nodding and all seriousness, the respect goes to this guy, because he's doing 2 things really importantly. Like you, Steve, he's really good at directing and putting folks together, just like you, but also just the decency He directed me in a film where I played the chief of police called Monster Hands Off My City, and it was very well covered by the Chronicle, and they said it truly is a masterpiece of artwork as well as anything else.
I'd like to interrupt you, Mike, and show just a picture of you from the film. In the scene that Mike was in, he's getting his picture painted by my mother. So
Nice.
that was a lot of fun, and it was just so much fun working with so many people. And we would be filming in the streets of San Francisco, and the cops would show up, and I'd explain what was going on, and they were just so. A lot of times they just hang around and make sure nothing, nobody interfered with us. So we were totally blessed.
I had met Mike and Brian Toohey before up at Sunset Playground because we lived there. And then I moved in right across the street from him on 15th Avenue between Irving and Judah. And it's just like a Sesame Street neighborhood. And across the street was Margaret Cho was in the neighborhood, the famous comedian. Al Madrigal was in the neighborhood right across the street from us. And, he's all these comedians. And so it was fun to just watch the hilarity. And it was like something you'd see in a movie, comedy corner. And Mike and his brothers were hilariously fun and big family, big Irish Catholic family. I would walk to mass every day at St. Anne's of the Sunset. And just, it was a time when I was opening for the Pope at Candlestick.
Wow.
But not
yeah,
only,
those must have been fun times, boy. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
The story that Mike tells is he gets a call Saturday morning from Paul Newman asking him to come out to his camp for kids. And
right.
Mike doesn't realize that it's that Paul Newman until about halfway through the conversation. But then he has to turn Paul Newman down because he goes, I can't do the dates you want. I'm opening for the Pope.
Come on, you can't be serious.
That's true. It was
that's awesome.
Part of the charmed life that Michael leads, but he does all the heavy lifting of the charity stuff. I just kind of bop along. So he was trying. I hope that wasn't recorded, Steve, about him giving me blowing all that smoke up my keister.
Oh well, Well, I think that time in San Francisco. That time in San Francisco, again, I was there in the mid '80s and whatnot, going to school, and boy, it seemed like a more, I don't know, maybe a more wholesome time, but a lot of fun with those, a lot of endearing families out there in the Sunset, and some good fun comedy with Robin and Mike and you guys, it just seemed like a really fun time.
Yeah, the Holy City Zoo. Mike was part of the Holy City Zoo crew as well. And just being around all that fun and working at the other cafe down at Carl and Cole. We had a great comedy scene. Then the Punchline downtown. Mm-hmm. We had a great comedy scene thriving there, and you could work a lot of places. And Mike and his brothers were great for that. They were always, like the Three Stooges. They were awesome.
Both of you, what years did you both start really getting in the comedy scene more actively?
Well, I started in '84, but Mike started earlier than that.
Yeah.
I started around '78, Dr. Tim, and it was fun for me because I had won the Gong Show, and I was working at Juvenile Hall as a probation officer.
Yeah, I remember that.
The same kind of work Steve did, because I worked with maximum security guys. They were tough, big kids, and a lot of them were, habitual criminal behavior. And so we sequestered them in a harder unit, and you had to really be awake to work that unit. You had to really be awake.
Yeah, serious business.
Just like a typical Air Force guy, he would try and make his experience in the juvenile hall equal to a maximum security Marine Corps prison. So, Mike.
Well, he did mention something that reminds me of my honeymoon, which was sequestered with a harder unit. So.
Yeah.
It was funny though, when I first met Mike, I was watching him on TV on a rerun of Taxi, where he
Yeah.
plays this enormous gay man who's dancing with Judd Hirsch. And then I go to the Holy City Zoo, and an hour later, I'm sitting there with Michael Pritchard going, "Hey, I just saw you on television," So it was that was kind of the fun scene in San Francisco. Was everybody was there? You'd see Robin Williams and Dana Carvey and a lot of people, and there was a good sort of commute between L.A. and Los Angeles, and then also the Boston comedy scene had a real explosion, and so there's a lot of back and forth between Boston and San Francisco as well.
Well, there was some sensitive material back there, and I think you guys were in the park performing, and I was like, whoa, I don't know, how can we get away with some of that stuff now, right? It's,
yeah, oh yeah, no,
the Comedy Celebration Day was huge. Then we used to get as much as 60,000 people out there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But it was fun, and Michael and his brothers were those kind of guys that just added to the high hilarity, because both Howard and Christopher were just devoted to slapstick and fun and brilliant comedy, and just watching them work and knowing that the family would, heck, if you just had the Meehan family come to the show, you had a full crowd.
We didn't have
and some of the no career direction.
Yeah, no, we just had fun, so that actually helped us just be as loony as possible. So
awesome.
So yeah,
awesome.
no, it was a fun time, but there's so much wonderful talent and so much great comedy. I try to, I teach comedy 1 day a week at the comedy college, which, a lifetime of screwing around has given me that skill, but I try to help people craft their story because people, they sign up for the comedy college to be funny or whatever, and basically just try to help them craft their story and put some jokes in or whatever. But I make reference to all these great comedians, and most of them are dead now. But it's still no denying that the stuff was so funny. But then a lot of the references are completely gone. People don't know who various actors or comedians were. One of the and this guy's still alive is Greg Travis, was a hilarious comedian. He did impressions, but he would do impressions like James Mason as one of the Three Stooges. And Kelly, I'm going to have to poke your eyes out. Nyap, 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 nyap. And I mean, to me, that's just brilliant comedy. But most people are like, who's James Mason? Who are the Three Stooges?
Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the big things that's amazing is the progression of your life, Mike, and how you came to be, a comedian, how you came to be a guy who was a director, and your artwork is incredible. And I know you're a humble guy, but you do art, you do carpentry, you do directing, you do acting, you do theater stuff, you teach. You're a high wire acrobatic guy. I mean, why do you think it's so important to do all that stuff and experience all that, and tell young people who are listening in and folks who are literally looking for another thing to do, why it's important to diversify like that?
Well, one thing, it's the curiosity of life. It's like you see something and you go, oh, how's that done? And my focus was always, well, I'm not going to pay money. Well, basically, the reason I did all this stuff is because I'm cheap. Because, I didn't want to, I wanted to learn how to do it more than have somebody pay to teach me. So I was willing to jump in and learn a lot of different things. And that just, and then necessity of just working all these different jobs, day jobs, I was attracted to comedy. So then I was like, okay, this is it. I really like this. But of course, you don't make money doing comedy early on unless you're successful. And even a lot of guys are just, barely getting by. They're working guys. But so I always had day jobs, but you had to have a day job that you could get some time off to. So I had a lot of different day jobs. And so that got me used to the insecurity of, figuring out. And I know Mike was very helpful with that. It was like, hey, everything's going to work out. And it does. But just having different jobs, learning different things, opens the scope. So if I was going to say to young people or people who are wondering, just go out and try things. It doesn't matter. You have nothing. Learning how to fail is one of the most wonderful things, because
Wow.
you see that it doesn't kill you. All you do is you go, oh, well, let me try something different. No one's making a permanent record, of your failures, even though everyone jumps on people now with the internet for their fails, and there's, fail army or whatever, but it doesn't matter. A part of it is, especially if, I know laughing at myself is one of the best ways to get through failure as well. So, but I would say try something that interests you or surprises you or challenges you. And that is how you open up. Like, I don't spend a lot of time doing a lot of things that just drain things. I look for creative things. I don't get emails on my phone, so I'm never looking at my phone constantly, which is like, that's just a practical thing. It's like, I see everybody squinting at their phones. We're going to become a nation of people who just like this.
Yeah.
But there's a whole world out there. Look at birds. Look at the shapes of clouds. Follow stuff. We were hiking yesterday out by Land's End, and there's wild onions. And I was like, telling my wife, hey, look at these wild onions. She's like, oh, and you snap them open and you can smell, oh, these are wild onions. So, I mean, just kind of opening doing things.
That's awesome. Yep. There's beauty all around us. But that, I would imagine that doing comedy was a great outlet for some of those stressors, and it's like playing music. It's like writing a book. I mean, it seems to me to be a great outlet for trauma and expression and that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's key. Is you can be outrageous on stage. It's a really safe place to say and do and sort of vent the spleen, and learning how to sort of shepherd that a little bit so it's not highly inflammatory or racist or sexist, so people are revolting, but you can still open up and really do that, psychic scream. And if you make it funny, then it becomes just a thing where people are like, oh my goodness, that was so funny.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about stand-up comedy when they come to you for instruction? Like, come take your class, coming in and they think, I want to be a stand-up comedian. Do they think it looks easy? Do they think they're just naturally funny? Like, what is there one thing that pops to mind that'd be like the biggest misconception, or is there a few of them?
Well, nobody wants to think that they're not funny. Even the sourest puss thinks that they're funny on some level. So it's crafting it to a certain point. But most of it deals with editing. Like, you have to edit down things. But ultimately, if you can make people laugh, that the message has gone across. It's the simplest form of communication, and knowing that your message has been broadcast and received and understood. When you
one thing about Michael is he's a very patient director, and he knows funny because he's back behind that, and then he's directing some of the funniest comedians I've ever been around, like Johnny Steele as a policeman.
Oh yeah.
And just the most fun comedians around, Dan Spencer, Jeremy Kramer, and he's directing them in subtle, silent, humble ways because he knows what funny is, and he knows the strengths of those folks too. And that alone is an art. And then to be able to teach young people comedy and the important, don't you think it's a survival mechanism, Mike, comedy?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely and people who haven't honed that sense of humor or that skill. Uh, it's like being trying to be an athlete when suddenly you turn 30. If you haven't been running around, you're going to pull some muscles. So and you're going to be awkward. But people who have been doing it for a while, they're much easier. It's easier to guide them through stuff. But and then some people are just so funny naturally, you know. But um,
Again, you guys had some great material.
Oh,
Irish tanning heroes, vanilla Irish, the whitest
yeah, well,
rapper ever.
Steven Heroes is our signature piece. But that was so fun to perform on stage because it ties back into venting because we could just yell and scream
Yeah,
and jump around and that's what I'd also say. It doesn't necessarily have to be comedy. For anybody suffering from trauma, I think singing, just opening up, connecting your feet to the earth and your voice and opening up to heaven, you become this pipeline. And that, I think, is the way to, and of course, you got to get it all out before you can really start to heal. And I think, you know, we see people who are disturbed yelling in the street, but when you connect up with singing or comedy or telling jokes or anything expressive, you're connecting to a deep psychic connection of this other spirit world, which then you start to see how valuable it is to connect to it, and you're like, oh yeah, I want to keep doing this, whether it
so
is
well
telling
put, Mike.
your art or
yep,
whatever.
yeah,
How many
amen.
people did you
Yeah.
remember when we were performing? How many lost souls were in our audiences at these places that we performed, Mike? How many
Oh yeah.
folks came in just for the connection, for something to laugh at, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Tell them
Oh
a
yeah.
couple. Describe. Do you remember Willie Tranquilli?
Oh yes, yes.
Tell them a
And
little bit about Willie. He would come in and perform, but he had a rat, a live rat, that would crawl around him on stage while he was trying to tell jokes at the Holy
Wow,
City.
wow.
yeah, it was very funny. But James Wesley Jackson, there was a guy who was just hilariously connected to. I don't know what vibe he was connected to, but it was just
The
so
Twilight Zone a lot.
the Twilight Zone for sure. But he was just so funny,
Yeah,
connecting with people, and he had such
hilarious
his
guy.
jazz was very slow, like he
Yeah.
would, but it was very like a slow form of jazz, but it was just so funny. It was
Well put.
yeah,
Well
it was like
put.
Stephen Wright,
Perfect
but it was
description.
jazz. He would have a little mouth harp that he would put in, and he would start boing, 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 and he'd say things, and so it had this musicality, but they were very funny. But right when he carried the mouth harp in a violin case, and he'd open it up, and he'd go, "Well, you live in a house," and then he would start, you know, boing, 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 you know. I see a blackout on Nob Hill. Boing, boing, boing. I see a policeman telling him to get back in his car and leave the neighborhood. Boing, 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 boing. You know, just
Well, and that spontaneity and that humor, it kind of feeds off one another, and you know, then you get to meet and rub shoulders with some pretty interesting folks at that point, huh?
absolutely. I mean, that's how I learned about Judaism. I grew up Irish Catholic, but all these comedians were Jewish, and they were always talking about, you know, going to the rabbi and singing stuff. And so it was a great education just for various people's culture too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which
We had
the
quite a
services
diverse
is.
group of people at the Holy City Zoo, and you had, ironically, some really superstars, and then some working class folks, and everybody was pretty humble and got along really well with comedians. You know, they had fun. Some really amazing moments in life and in comedy, and then we had Monty Hoffman, who was a tough New Yorker, and Mike and I Mike and I would spend time trying to keep the peace amongst comedians, because pretty much they were pretty rancorous at times and hard on themselves and then each other. And it was like important to have folks around to keep the peace. Mike was one of them.
Well, Mike was the big guy. He saved a lot of people's bacon, including myself. So he's being humble right there. But there was a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of interesting people. And I think that's the thing, is just find something that you can express yourself with. Too much of it is like, oh, I've got to start a company and be the president of this new app or something. And that's good on an entrepreneurial spirit side. But most of these people, after a while, burn out and say, oh, I need something that's deeper. I need some spiritual connection.
Yeah, they're not feeding their soul.
Yeah. And that's where art and expression and even, I'm sure service work especially feeds the soul. I mean, oh my goodness, you must, both of you, Dr. Tim and Steve, you must feel that when you're helping people. It's like, oh, that's the greatest feeling in the world.
Well, it is.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
While this is a bit of a, you feel like you're kind of jumping off a cliff when you start an organization like this, but you're right. I think giving back to our brothers that have served, and this is important for me, and it feeds the soul. And we're trying to get back. We're trying to help guys that have and gals that have served our country. So it's definitely a feel good thing, and hopefully we can make an impact.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, Steve, tell Michael about what you're doing with the van or the truck site, and tell him what's going on there, because at some point we're going to hit him up to do a benefit for us with the other comedians.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So we have a 53-foot tractor trailer that's down in Austin right now that was given to us, donated to us by a woman who, she and her husband had an organization called Christina's Smile for almost 30 years, and they traveled around the country. They had 3 of these things, and they were sponsored by the Senior PGA Golf Tour and Roadway Trucking and just a lot of big kind of corporate sponsors. And they would, wherever the golf tour would go, they would park this in the nearby neighborhoods or town, cities. Like for Pebble Beach, they go to Salinas and things like that. And then dentists like Dr. Tim would come for a day or a couple of days and volunteer and do free dental work for underprivileged kids. And so they did that for a long time. And then a few years back, Dr. Garza passed away kind of unexpectedly, certainly too soon. And his wife, Diane, kept the trailers in storage. And Tim contacted me and said, told me the story and just said, she could sell these or give them away or whatever. They're state-of-the-art dental offices on wheels. There's 3 chairs, an x-ray lab, like you can do all kinds of work in there, according to Tim, and from what they used to do as well. And so we flew down there last year and met with her, and she showed us one, and we talked to her about it, the ideas for kind of creating a new organization, and presented the idea of taking care of veterans. And she was unaware of what a lot of people are unaware of, which is that veterans don't receive dental care unless they're 100% disabled, have been a prisoner of war, a Purple Heart recipient, or have a service-connected dental issue. So it's the lowest of the lowest percentage of veterans that actually get any kind of dental care. And so there's a ton of veterans out there that need the help. So we ran it by her, and she said, well, if you go and you want to start an organization, I'll just give you this one. You can have it. And so I turned to Tim and well, I guess we're starting an organization. So we came back up and we formed it, and we've had a couple board meetings, and we've got a great board mix of veterans and dentists and business people in the community. And we're getting ready to bring it up here. We were getting ready to pull the trigger and hire a driver to bring it up right before all the shelter in place started. But we have some money in the bank to do that with, and we're going to get it up here and then start, hopefully later this year when things open up, be able to start putting together some clinics and taking care of veterans. So, the other part of that is we'll have fundraisers. We're down the road, we'll be seeking support from the VA itself to hopefully offset the work that we're doing. But right out of the gate, we're a nonprofit organization that is going to be relying on grants and donations and sponsorships and fundraisers. So, Michael Pritchard here is on our advisory board to help us out with all that stuff as well. The COVID-19 shelter in place kind of just made it to where, well, we're at our home, and then the Zoom explosion is happening, and we said let's get this thing going. So now we have this platform of In the Barracks that we're going to be rolling out new episodes every Friday, and who knows how much longer we'll be in the shelter in place, but it'll continue after that. And this is just kind of giving us a chance to get the groundwork laid and get some episodes rolling before everyone gets back out there. So
awesome. Yeah, good background, Steve. And so
That was perfect, Steve. That was absolutely great. Now I wanted to just shift over to this. Mike, you have seen the city of San Francisco change in the past 15 years, and there's so many homeless on the street. What do you see? Because you're very smart. Tim and Steve and I are interested in how do we help the city of San Francisco with the issue of if we can alleviate with the veterans some of the sorrows and sadness and pain out there on the streets with the homeless. What have you noticed? What have you seen that be the change in your family and the issues that you come across? Because I mean, you have a huge family, and they all must discuss this, and plus folks in the neighborhood. What have you seen? What are the big changes there in the homelessness issue, Mike? If you could share.
Well, just with the shutdown, people are a lot more desperate. There's no place to go to the bathroom. All the libraries and the Starbucks are closed. So there's a lot more people just having to go to the bathroom on the street. But in a larger sense, finding some sort of place where people can stabilize. Now, a lot of people, in fact, most people who are homeless have a very low tolerance for bureaucracy. Now, I have a house, but I have a low, I live in a house. I don't have a house, but I live in a house. But I have a low tolerance for bureaucracy. But, put yourself on the street without bathing and everything else, that's going to give you a low tolerance for having to follow certain rules and regulations or do this or that. So I don't know. I mean, if I knew the answers, I could wave a magic wand. But people having a place to live, I always thought the idea of putting people in places where they could establish a place to live and work and do something. I mean, Reagan shut all the mental institutions, which were, and a lot of people then had no place to go. Those, of course, are giant bureaucracies. But the idea of having something to do, very interesting article I read on refugee camps is when they put them in linear units and everything's lined up, that you still have all crime and you have all sorts of people who don't progress beyond refugee status. But when you change the shape of a refugee camp into a circle where you have everybody surrounds a circle, so there's 20 or 50 cabins or tents, you have a central area, people can see who's doing what, and they are far more cooperative. And I think something like that is probably the model that dealing with the homeless issue would be. And I don't think cities have that space, so you may have to go to someplace outside of a city. But if you create a camp of some sort that is enabling people to have their own place and to start to see that what they do is of worth, and that starts with just learning how to make your bed and of course a lot of people suffer from all sorts of mental delusions. I mean, my brother took his own life because of his mental illness, and he's got a huge loving family and everything else. So a lot of the people out there are suffering from that. So it's not like you can just say, okay, well, here, if we give you a nice place to live, you're going to be fine. Because the reason people are homeless is because they can't deal with what has existed, but it's accelerated once they're on the street. So, but I think some people can be reached. Certainly, people who are able to sober up and stabilize a little bit, maybe have a better shot at it. But if we're going to sit there and go, "Hey, this works because 25% of the people get well," or something like that, it's difficult to quantify. I think so.
Right.
Like I said, I don't.
Why is it so important? Why is it so important for all of us as citizens to volunteer? I love your brother Howard, and I love you. And I just know that I appreciate you sharing that with us today, because it helps us understand, not overstand, but understand. But Mike, why is it important for us to do this outreach with the dental programs, with all of these programs that help that suffering on the street? What's, in your opinion, why is that so important for all of us to do what we can and do our part as American and community unity citizens?
Well, I think it's connecting with people. I mean, like, as much as, like, say, alcoholism, drug addiction is about isolation, so is homelessness. So it's having a human connection and someone cares about them that can start them on the way. But it's a long uphill road. But I think connecting with people. I mean, the people who are, say, homeless, who have a regular place they go to and people know them, they're part of the community. So, I mean, I think that helps stabilize them. And unless you're suffering from extreme mental difficulties, I think that works when you still have a place in the community. You're not chased out of town and tarred and feathered or scorned. You're accepted, and people are kind to you, and they offer you things, and they say hello. But of course, a lot of times, we're busy with our lives. We don't have time to engage with that person. But I do see the people who are homeless or marginalized, if they find a little place to connect up and be part of the community, that they seem a lot more stabilized. So,
what does that do for them, Michael, in your opinion? What does that do to have some sort of anchor in the community?
Well, it gives you a purpose, like all of us. I mean, we look for a purpose. I mean, that gives you, hey, I can't go off and do this. I have to do this. Like this one guy, all he does, he sweeps this sort of corner on 9th and Irving. And he's just, I don't know if somebody gave him a broom one time or whatever, but that's his thing. And he greets people. And I've seen him sometimes be off his medication maybe, but for the most part, he's stabilized. He says hello to people. People know him. They give him things. He's connected with the community. So
Yep.
Is where it starts.
Dr. Tim, can you remember a person you dealt with who had major trauma in their childhood, whether it was a vet or whatever, and it kind of shocked you as you were, because when you started to give them nurture, comfort, and healing, they wanted to reveal more to you. Can you remember a time like that?
Well, I think we see it a lot. I feel, again, fortunate to do the work that we do. And it's not only dental work, but you're working with human beings, and they become family and friends, and those relationships are built on trust. And so you come in contact with a lot of them. And when we did some of that pathway homework, Michael, you could really see the trauma in these poor guys' eyes. I treated a gentleman that was simply just roaming around Northern California for 4 years, smoking methamphetamine, and he was super angry. We started initially doing some work on him, and unfortunately we lost track of him. I'm not sure where he ended up going, but I hope he's still okay. But just lost souls, and trying to deal with horrific trauma. So over the years, and then you interact with families and friends that have lost loved ones, like Michael here. It's tragic. I lost my older brother when I was 33 and he was 37. It was awful. And so those traumas, we see those people. It's just human interaction. It's organic. It happens on a daily basis. I think maybe there's different fields that see it up front and more personal than others. of course, the nurses and the doctors right now that are out there on the front lines, like your son, Michael.
Yeah.
He's just seen it. It's just, it's real. So,
Mike knew him since he was a baby. Brian was a year old when Michael had to move in across the street from him, and he watched him grow up, and you can see it. He's such a fine young man. But the world weighs heavy on those on the front lines: first responders, healers, nurses, and now grocery clerks, bus drivers. The world weighs heavy on us, and that's why it's important for us to do these kind of conversations. Thank you, Tim, for sharing that about your brother, because this is how we know we have so much commonality. This is how we know we're going to get better, stronger, wiser, when we stop judging people so much and start helping people more.
Well,
Now, can I ask you, Steve, how many times were you kind to those prisoners that you were guarding?
A lot, Mike. A lot.
I know.
I was very kind.
There was a lot of instruction there, wasn't there, Steve, with the prisoners in the brig? You were instructing them, correct? Because you were a sergeant. I mean, you were a high-ranking staff sergeant, man, So what was your method?
Fair, firm, and professional, Mike.
Sergeant
Gavin.
I love you so much, man. You'll never know. Fair, firm, and professional.
That's probably a whole different episode of In the Barracks if you want to get into that stuff. But I could bring on some. I could bring on some characters from that era if you want to go down that road. But
I do want to guys you work with. I know Summer's husband, Dr. Summer Watson, who's incredible, and she's from Warrior Research, and she is one of the geniuses behind our work, Michael Meehan, who helps us so much, and she's such a measured, wise soul, and works with Marine Corps and military families, helping them. And this conversation that we've had today has been powerful to me, because it encapsulates everything I try to teach about emotional intelligence: laughter, joy, fun, creativity, compassion, medicine, and the good medicine that we can bring to the world by, it's not just physical medicine, it's also emotional medicine of, like you said, about connection. And I remember one of the young guys at Pathways who said, man, everybody said that when you go to Afghanistan, you're going to get a lot of flashbacks. He goes, hell, I had flashbacks from the neighborhood I grew up in before I even went to war.
Yeah.
Those guys need our help out there, and some give up on themselves. They give up on their dental health, their mental health, and this Vets Dental Mobile Unit is part of that outreach, part of that connectivity to community unity, to respect and honor to those veterans who are out there on the streets needing just sometimes a lifeline. And why is that lifeline so important, do you think, Tim? Because you see it.
Well, I think it's important, again, to, like Michael says, to stabilize these individuals, right, and get them back into society where they do have purpose, they do have dignity. And so I think hopefully, again, the Vets Mobile Unit is just one way of giving back, and it might create a platform where we can stabilize and like I said, get people out of pain, but also listen to people's emotional well-being and what can we do for you? How can we help you? And get them back into a functional situation. So.
Yeah, Aeschylus had a great line. He said, the great Greek philosopher, with every drop of pain on the human heart, wisdom grows, wisdom grows, wisdom grows. Mike Meehan, what do you see the future portend for you? Are you going to be doing more directing and more comedy, or if you had a dream of how you'd like to unfold all of it, what would you like to do most of all the things you do?
Well, of course, I'd like to direct another movie. I've written a sequel, which would be exciting. Doing stand-up shows. I mean, I'd love to do some benefits for the vets dental thing. I mean, that to me is the most
Great.
fun, is just doing shows, live shows. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how that's going to look will be dictated. But I think, I've been going to just, you can even do a show outside where people are sitting,
Right.
a little bit apart from each other. So it's not that pie in the sky, but those are the things that I love to do. Sure, I'd love to make another movie. I'd love to do things. I like to continue to do art. I've been writing a musical on intestinal parasites about schistosomiasis, and that's almost finished. So.
Is this? Are you teaming?
Oh,
is
man.
this have anything to do with kicking yourselves in the testicles for tetanus, Michael?
But it's very close to the region, so we've written a lot of
Yeah.
good, funny songs about it, and so.
A musical.
Well, my son's in sixth
Sounds like
grade.
it's going to be some funny shit.
Well, it definitely is. Definitely is.
Well, I'm hoping that the Vets Mobile is a better launch pad than River Dancing for Rabies.
Yeah. Well, you never know. You never know. You never know how.
Or it's funny until it happens to you, Michael.
Yes, that was the catchphrase that we always used about.
What's the other one? I love this one. Horseback riding for hemorrhoids.
Yeah, saddle up and say I care. And that was very funny. My brother Howard and I would talk about it, and my brother Chris would mime the action behind us. Skydiving for psoriasis, and
Yeah.
I got a quick question for you, Michael.
yes,
You said you'd like to do a sequel to the Hey Monster, Hands Off My City.
yes, sir.
I just have one request. Request. You have to make sure and kill Michael Pritchard in this one because he has to die in everything he's in.
Don Johnson beat me up in Nash Bridges. Killed me. Don Johnson killed me. The favorite one, though, was even to this day, my son Connor, the comedy writer, put up this episode of me watching a car explode. And he put this up, and it's me going like this. Oh, God, no. And then underneath it, he's
I think that
can never get acting work.
I think that clip might somehow make it into this podcast. We'll see we'll see when I'm editing if I can go ahead and work that in there for you.
Wonderful.
Oh.
You got any a story that you can relive for us or tell about Pritch from back in an 80s story for us that he wouldn't share with us?
Oh my goodness. Well, he's kicked down the doors of several, drug houses and rescued more than a few comedians. Trying to think of a couple of. Gosh, I can't think of them right now, and if I did, I probably shouldn't repeat them. So. But he saved my own bacon. He saved my own bacon from a fate.
How's that?
So he drove me up to rehab many years ago and put my recovery on his credit card, and it took me 20 years to pay him back. So I'm ever grateful for that. I remember doing a job, and I suddenly had like $4 $4,500 cash, and it was just before Christmas, and I was going, all right, this is great. And then suddenly I realized, oh, I got to pay Mike Pritchard from the rehab 20 years ago. Wait a minute.
Well, I want to tell one quick one, because the fella has passed away. Monty Hoffman was a comedian in the city, and he was known for his Better Living Through Chemicals programs in all of the nightclubs. And he had a guy with him, and the kid was on probation, and I had been helping that kid from juvenile hall, and Monty hired him as a bodyguard, and he punched a guy in the middle of the club, and the guy went over pointing like this in the middle. He was going to say something to the guy, Tim, and he went unconscious on the floor pointing at Tim, who had punched him unconscious. And the look was, Monty goes, "This is a miracle. Look at this." He knocks him unconscious, and he's still pointing. Wow. This is comedy 1980s.
Wow. Wow.
Well, the other Monty Hoffman story was they were doing a benefit backstage. You were there, Mike. You were telling us a story, and there was a clown, and he had the big painted smile on his face, and somehow he insulted Monty Hoffman. So then Monty Hoffman's beating up the clown, but because the clown has the big happy smile on his face, going, "Stop! No!" Smiling.
Nobody was beating up the clown, and he was doing it in front of children at a big benefit for the guardsmen. And the guy had a trickle of blood going down his thing. He's laying up like this. And Monty realizes there's children watching because he just was beating them up. And then he turns and he goes, "Hey, oh, just kidding, kids, just kidding."
Well, Mike, you continue to do great work. Awesome. And, it sounds like you and Michael have a special relationship, and it's just great to have you guys on this morning. And
thanks very much, Tim. This guy's always been, he and his family have always been a great blessing to me. And I not too long ago, I stood up with all the firemen and cops, and I said, if you want to know what family looks like, these two guys, Brian and he, were family all through the time I met them when they were kids. And we just went to his 60th birthday party. So I feel like I've lived a blessed line. And that line goes through to right now for COVID-19. And it's from Charles Dickens said, "We come to know at the end of all time that it's not always those we share our blood with that become family, but those that we might give our blood for that become family."
That's all.
And that's all of us right here in the barracks.
Yeah. Well, you exemplified that, helping your good friend Michael Meehan out here. And Mike, so lucky to have you on. And we're, I would love it. Yeah, love to have you come out and tell some jokes, get our folks laughing, and after COVID kind of lifts up here a little bit, try and get some people some healing.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. Get out,
Sure.
Get some people come in. We raise some money, have some laughs, and help these folks out there. So thank you.
Good man, Michael. Semper Fidelis, but
Awesome.
Absolutely. Semper Fi.
All right, Semper Fi. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it very much. Thank you,
Sure,
Michael, and
absolutely.
thank you, Dr. Tim.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you,
all you
Michael.
guys.
Yeah,
We'll see y'all soon.
it.
Thank you for joining us in the barracks. To learn more about our hosts, guests, and how to support Vets Mobile Dental Unit, visit www.inthebarracks.org.